spotlight Dawn so she gets a big picture of her own face right in front there. So welcome everyone. My name is Madeline. I am one of the retreat managers at the Big Bear Retreat Center. And we really love offering the lunchtime mindfulness to everyone. It started initially for two things. We really are looking to grow the Big Bear Retreat Center Sangha, the community. So just by being here, you're helping us do that, and we're so happy you're here. And then also, we frequently have yogis who've been on retreat or teachers who are about to be on retreat who join to kind of help support with a continuity of practice. And so Dawn is not just coming off retreat, and we are like really trying to get her at the center as soon as we can. So we'll be working at that. She has been out before, but we'll be working on that behind the scenes. So this lunchtime mindfulness is freely offered, obviously, in this drop-in format. We're here every Wednesday at noon for connection and community. And just a little housekeeping to let you know, we are live streaming the session. So if for some reason you want to ask a question but you don't want your voice on audio, you're welcome to send me a message in the chat, Madeline, and I'm happy to ask Dawn for you. And I'm going to go ahead and share a little bit about Dawn. She has a really, she's quite accomplished and has a really long bio. So I'm going to do a little bit of an abbreviated version so I don't take half of her time. So yeah, Dawn has been practicing and studying insight meditation since 2005. And she does have like 10 or 12 like really amazing credentials. So you can find them on her website. She has teacher training, trauma-informed healing modalities, somatic work from all the amazing places, Spirit Rock, True North Insight, all the cool places. So she has a really strong teaching and facilitating background. She does day-long retreats, regular retreats, like week-long, even year-long programs. She has a community on her website that you can join. She does mindfulness workshops in Canada and in the United States. She wrote a book, and I found her a few years ago on the 10% Happier app. So I had been listening to her a while back, and so that was really cool as well. So yeah, for us, it just means that she really shares kind of a unique combination of Buddhist wisdom, mindfulness meditation, somatic therapy, just a really nice combination, her background. So we're really pleased and lucky to have her here today. And I will go ahead and turn it over to you, Dawn.
Thank you so much.
Thank
When
you.
when I was listening to you say, oh, she has a long list of this and that, I was like, oh my gosh, that explains why I'm so tired. But um, yeah, it's also one of those, it's like a blessing and a curse, loving to learn. And so I always make this deal with myself every few months, like no more trainings. And then suddenly right now, before February, I have like 3 that I'm trying to wrap up, even though I said I wouldn't do any more trainings, but here we are. Um, Really excited to be here. I loved being on the land at Big Bear a couple years ago, so it's certainly been a while. I'm based in Jajage Muniang, colonially known as Montreal, which makes it a little bit harder to get out there. I was just teaching a retreat with actually some folks who also really adore Big Bear Retreat Center. So some of you might have seen Gulu Singh pass by in some of these sessions. At the retreat center, there was also Gina Devereaux, Yang O. And so we were all just teaching together at Spirit Rock. And the retreat that we were teaching was really focused on devotional practices. And I'll talk a little bit about that later after our meditation. But I will guide us through a meditation that's about 20 or so minutes, at least 20 minutes long. If I could stretch it to maybe 25, I will. But in the spirit of bringing in some of these devotional practices, in the guidance, you'll hear me prompt you. But of course, you can also disregard. I'll never know, basically, if you're doing your own thing and you're tuning me out. But I will offer using a mantra, and the mantra is simply Buddho. And I'll post it in the chat just in case folks are a little bit more visual, and then with a short explanation as well. So Buddha, it's much like Buddha, except it has an O at the end. And it's a word that points to being fully present while aligning with the refuge of the Buddha. And you might have feelings about like aligning with the Buddha for whatever reason. But one of the ways, in case it is a challenge for you, it could be simply that the Buddha was human and he did awaken. We are human. And maybe it's this lifetime we awaken, and so it could be taking refuge in our capacity to awaken, whether it's this lifetime or one very soon, at least is what I'm hoping for. In other words, Buddha is just this present knowing awareness, basically. So if you do use it as a way to anchor the mind, it could be this inclination, orientation of the heart and mind toward this presence, this knowing, this awareness that is already present, that is already natural, but we practice as a way to remove the gunk so we can see that part of ourselves more clearly, basically. Just a note, so Madeline did spotlight me, and for those of you who are here on Zoom, it could be supportive. Another way that could be supportive is by switching to gallery view where you see everyone in small screens, just in case if over the next 20 or 20 plus minutes, you are convinced that your Zoom has crashed and you're like, the meditation cannot still be going on. And then you kind of open one eye and you see everyone else meditating. I find that a nice kind of support or motivation for me to continue practicing, basically. You're getting a peek into my mind. So with that said, given that our practice will be at least 20 minutes, choose a posture that can be supportive for that length of time. It could be seated, standing, lying down. It could also be walking, as long as you stay within distance of your device so that you know when our practice is over. And then in the spirit of the slowing down that we're doing on this lunch hour, you might look around and just silently note or say to yourself either the colors you see or the objects you see, like plant, blanket, mug, or maybe it's simply green, white, gray, etc. And then eventually coming back forward, you can lower the gaze if you're ready, or close the eyes. And take a few moments to simply tune in or recognize the posture you're in. And so, yes, on a superficial level, you might know that you're seated or standing, lying down or walking. But what are the sensations that tell you that you are in this position? Is it because certain parts of the body are touching down? Is there hardness or softness? Maybe there are more sensations because you're moving, doing a walking meditation as you listen. Invite the body, the heart, and mind to relax any amount. There might be a little letting go. There might be a lot of letting go, or no letting go. All of it is welcome here. Notice what you notice. Is it sounds? Is it movements? Maybe your internal landscape, like thoughts or emotions, level of energy. Although some might be pleasant, others unpleasant, all of them are welcome. Not prioritizing some over others. You might gather the heart and mind around an object that you're already noticing. Perhaps sound, perhaps sensation. Perhaps it's following the ebb and flow, the expansion and contraction of emotions or thoughts. Choosing one, or maybe something familiar like your breath. And staying with it as best you can, like you're meeting a good friend that you haven't been with for a while. With interest, with care, with curiosity. As you know, the mind will wander, and that's not a problem. In fact, what you're noticing when you notice that the mind has wandered is mindfulness returning. And so instead of maybe judging, being disappointed in the mind for wandering, you might instead be joyful, welcoming that mindfulness is returning. No matter how often it's going or how long it's been gone, it returns. And if by chance the mind is quite active, a lot of agitation, or maybe what you're experiencing is more big emotions, whether pleasant or unpleasant, in which case you may gather the heart and mind more intentionally around the mantra Buddho, this present, this knowing, this awareness that is already present within us. And so breathing in, you might silently say to yourself, Bud. And breathing out, Do. Bud, Do. Bud, Do. And in between the recitations of this mantra, Buddho, might simply just tune into what you notice, sensations, feelings, thoughts, before the next half breath and the next half mantra. And however we're practicing being with your anchor, being with each moment as best you can, like a good friend, tender, caring, curious. If you're using the Buddha mantra, letting it fade away and simply observe or listen, notice to the space that's left behind. And if you were practicing in another way, same thing. Can you let your practice go so that in the last few minutes here, you can simply rest, you can simply be. No need to be mindful, no need to even notice when mindfulness returns. Although that might happen, just bringing in a few moments of ease, of being, abiding. Welcome back. And if you'd like, you could stretch or scratch that itch or whatever it is you need to do. So I'll share some Dharma reflections, and then after that, we'll have some time for questions or sharings, etc. What I mentioned at the beginning of our time together was that I just finished teaching a retreat at Spirit Rock with some teachers that you might be familiar with because they have passed through Big Bear: Gulu Singh, Yang O, Juna Devereaux. We were teaching, the retreat was called Reclamation of the Sacred, and a lot of the practices, in addition to the meditations, there was also chanting and bowing a few times a day even. And these are the practices that we've all have experienced through our teachers who have also taught at Big Bear a couple times, Tanisra and Kittasaro. And for those of you who have done retreats, you kind of know it's like this alternate reality. And so the retreat ended on Sunday. And so then I kind of like come out of the retreat, and then it's like, oh my gosh, Black Friday, Cyber Monday, this and that. So it was definitely a contrast. And then I couldn't help but think, especially because of the theme of the retreat that I was just coming out of, and then going into this whole, like, not just the reality, although sometimes this world feels like the alternate reality, but just the extreme of it, just the extreme consumerism, and yeah, so the extremity of that. And then of course, this is against the backdrop of polycrises, AI boom, and stuff like that, And then I couldn't help but wonder, just what is our society actually devoted to? If these are the things that are, where we're putting all of our money and attention and time, etc. It's like, what are we actually devoted to as a society? And to keep with the maybe devotional theme here, it's like, I feel like in a lot of ways, I'm preaching to the choir. If you're here, it's kind of like a self-selecting group already. And I think it does need to start somewhere, basically. Devotion is being expressed all the time. It is everywhere. And so if that is the case, the question becomes like, what are we devoted to? Sometimes we're devoted to things mindlessly and sometimes mindfully. Like we could be devoted to family, to friends, to loved ones, but also we might not realize we're devoted to work, to our phones, to burnout, to isolation. Sometimes I think, oh, it's just easier for me to look up someone's profile to get a sense of how they're doing versus actually engaging and connecting with them. And so in that sense, I'm prioritizing or devoting myself toward the isolation and not the connection, for example. And then in addition to that, we're also devoted, whether we realize it or not, that to this like modern conditioning we have, where we have these strong values of scientific thought, rationality, secularism. And then as a result, we might prioritize certain learnings or teachings over others. For example, on the retreat, someone had used the term woo-woo. And then behind the scenes in the teacher's lounge, we had this discussion around how that's actually derogatory, because if there's scientific knowledge and then everything else outside of scientific knowledge is considered woo-woo, then we are prioritizing the scientific knowledge and kind of demeaning or casting as lesser than any indigenous knowledge, for example. But I like to think that if now in this day and age, people are studying the brain and then discovering that what the Buddha taught was true 2,600 years ago. If we use those same metrics, well, then Buddhism back in the day would have been woo-woo, because it wasn't being proven by science. I heard this once from the teacher, Brian Lesage, who's based in Flagstaff. Just kind of talking about ritual and how ritual, for me, ritual is an expression of devotion. But basically, ritual can be this repetitive thing that we do over and over. And it doesn't necessarily bring new information. But the example that Brian Lesage gave was when we say, I love you, we could say, I love you to a friend, a partner, a pet, whatever. And so by saying, I love you over and over, it's not necessarily offering new information, but the repetition has this potential of deepening, reinforcing, reminding, and expanding us of this important aspect of the relationship. And so something as simple as saying, I love you repeatedly is a kind of ritual. So it's repetitive and it doesn't bring new information, but there is a deepening. There is something that's happening there. And the heart and body learn something through this repetition from doing it day in and day out. And so if that is true, again, the question, what are we devoted to? What are we, feeding the heart day in and day out? Could it be like even things like judgment and harshness and perfectionism, even if the intention is good, but is it coming through as this harshness, David Loy, and I'll put this in the chat as well. There's this quote that I really love from David Loy. Our present economic system institutionalizes greed. Our militarism institutionalizes ill will, and the corporate media institutionalizes delusion. And so this is, if you didn't pick up on it, the greed, ill will, and delusion, those are the three poisons. And then the way that David Loy puts it is it's happening in the systems we're a part of. It's happening all around us. And I feel like it doesn't take much convincing to see that as being true. And so even though sometimes we might think of devotion and ritual as like this very individual practice, and then I bring in this quote about some of our systems, it's easy to think like, oh my gosh, how do these two relate? And kind of like, what can I possibly do? And so this is from our teacher, Tanisra. And again, I'll post it in the chat. The work of profound systemic transformation is deeply informed by this inner work of transforming our own hearts and minds. And so, like I said a few moments ago, it kind of has to start somewhere. And so even though I might be preaching to the choir, some of you might already, it didn't take much buy-in from you as soon as they said, what are we devoted to? Ritual. You might have been like, yeah, let's go. And I think still it's a worthy reminder, basically. This is from Rob Berbea, and Rob Berbea was a Gaia House resident teacher for 10 years who passed away, I think, less than 10 years ago. But I'm going to put this into the chat and read this out loud, this quote, because sometimes when I talk about ritual and devotion, there are some people who feel like, oh no, it's not for me. Maybe because it is woo-woo, as I mentioned, how some of us are really rooted in needing things to be scientifically proven. Or it could simply be because we don't know where to start. And so I really like this quote. One sometimes feels like ritual has to be prescribed. It's like we get told what to do, but actually it can be very freestyle. A person can find their own expression of ritual or change it. It doesn't need to be the same. It's like following an inner impulse. The form may be there, the devotion may not be there. The form may not be there, and the devotion may be there. And so all this to say is that I think it's like an expression of the heart. And whatever is the sincere expression of the heart cannot be wrong. Some folks do like to be told, okay, chant these things this many times, do these many bows. And that's fine, because some people thrive more under this sort of structure. And other times, or other people, I count myself as one of these, I prefer it to be much more freestyle. Maybe because I had older brothers who always told me what to do, so I don't like being told what to do. And so as a result, it's kind of like, what is it like? What does my heart and mind yearn for right now, basically? And so even a little ritual that I have with my daily practice is, as I set myself up for practice, I might think my usual go-to, in air quotes, is seated practice, mindfulness of the breath. But that's not very responsive to the changing conditions of my life. And so other times, or when I settle into my practice, I might just check in with my body. Is this actually supportive being seated? There could be new aches and pains, and so maybe not. So I might choose lying down or walking, back support. And then I check in again with just like, how am I showing up? What is here? Sometimes it's like pretty steady. So yes, I can do my usual go-to practice. Other times it's like, there's just a lot of heaviness, maybe grief or sadness or joy. So then it might instead be a practice around being with my emotions, or loving kindness practice or something like that. On this past retreat, Gulu taught, or Gulu's talk was on the hindrances that some of you might be aware of. There are 5 hindrances: craving, aversion, sloth and torpor, restlessness and worry, and doubt. And what I appreciated of Gulu's talk, other than his dad jokes, some of you might know that he does a lot of Buddhist dad jokes, is toward the end of his talk, he had said, so, you might at some point take an inventory of your life and just write down 2 columns. What are the things that you're doing that do bring you less craving, less aversion, less restlessness, less doubt, etc.? And what are the things that support, maybe generosity, loving kindness, clarity, etc.? And I love just that simple, like, kind of tally, that listing. And so you might maybe do the same thing in regards to this question: what are we devoted to? What am I devoted to? Because we might have certain values. And on the grand scheme of things, it's like, of course, I'm devoted to ease and non-harm and kindness, collective liberation, whatever it might be. But then when you actually jot down where you place your attention, how you spend your time, it could be quite sobering. When in some of the devotional practices that we do that, as I mentioned, come from our teachers, Thanissaro and Kittasaro, there is chanting toward the Bodhisattva of compassion, Kuan Yin. And the chant that we use is Mo Kuan Shi Yin Pusa. But what I really appreciate is just even that Namo, that first part, which some of you might recognize if you've been on retreat or have done any Buddhist chanting. When we chant refuges to the Buddha, or we pay homage to the Buddha, it's Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Sama Sambuddhassa. And so that Namo is that paying homage, that reverence, the honoring. The way that our teacher Kittasaro describes Namo is, I return my life, or this return to. And so in some ways, as you might explore, what are you devoted to? Just in case any of you are perfectionists, hard on yourself, like I was, my first few years of practice. No need. That's just kind of a waste of time, to put it to put it simply. But you can think of it as this returning, that you forgot for a while what is most important to your heart, and that with Namo, you're trying to return your life, pay homage, bring this reverence that your life is very worthy of. It doesn't have to just be on retreat, that there's this devotion, this refuge, this sacredness, this ritual. But in everyday life, it's very possible, very worthy. And again, well, actually, maybe to end before I open it up for any shares or discussion, this comes from Valerie Kaur. It's a quote that I love. I think I heard it in 2020, 2021, certainly during COVID, but it was like a long time ago. And I find it's such a great quote. Valerie Kaur is an author, activist, professor. And she was just talking about the challenging times that we're in. And then she said something like, it's no doubt, or it's undeniable that these times are challenging. But is this the darkness of the tomb, or is this the darkness of the womb? And so I really love that, because it's kind of like we don't know, unfortunately, if this is the darkness of the tomb or the darkness of the womb. But I want to do whatever is possible, not just on retreat, but also in my daily life, that makes the darkness or the challenging times that we are living through the darkness of the womb and not of the tomb. So, thank you for your attention. And then I'd love to just hear if there are any questions or shares. We have some time for that. And you could write it in the chat as well. You can send it directly to me or to Madeline. You could also unmute. I'd love to have other voices in the space if you'd like. Yes, Susan.
Thank you very much for this. I was actually supposed to be at a retreat at this very moment at Big Bear, but my boss requested that I don't go because she thought this was going to be an intense week at work. So I'm glad that I'm here, even though I can't be there.
Mm-hmm.
And as far as ritual, I was doing a lot of silent meditation retreats at Spirit Rock in 2000, and then I just did a documentary on silence, and I interviewed Thich Nhat Hanh and a bunch of other people. But the person who worked for me was Jewish, and she said, "Well, why don't you just find it in your own religion?" And why don't you do the Sabbath? And I said, "I can't do the Sabbath. I work in my job." But anyway, I started to do it, and it's been I've been doing it like for over 25 years, but I do it in my own way.
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
light the candles.
Mm-hmm.
I used to do it with my significant other before she passed away, and it was very moving. But now I just light the candles, I unplug, and I don't talk to anybody for 25 hours. And it gives me the freedom to just be away from everybody and to be with me. And I can I could read Buddhist books, I can do whatever I want on that day. But that's a gift that I've given to myself. And, people will think, oh, well, she's just doing her crazy religious thing. But let them think that it gets me the permission to unplug and not have to be at anyone else's disposal. So that's been really good for me. And I hope to still go on some retreats and Big Bear as well. I hope I can, do it in the spring or before. So thank you. Thank you for what you did. Just wanted to share that.
Thank you. Thank you, Susan. Beautiful share. Like so many of the practices in different religions are really about having us turn inward, get more closer to ourselves. And, just as simple in air quotes, because it's actually quite challenging for people to unplug nowadays. How simple and effective and impactful that could be. That one ritual that you do once a week, that just even for a short amount of time, although 25 hours is a chunk of time, that you're not subject to other people's opinions and thoughts, but you could actually tune into what does your heart and mind hold, what does it yearn for, etc. And I like to think that in a lot of ways, that's what we're doing when we meditate. And how can we do it on a more sustained way, especially because not everyone can go on retreat. So I appreciated that you mentioned that you wanted to be on retreat, aren't. And so what are the ways that we can, bring in pockets of retreat into our daily life too, so that our awakening, our personal liberation in service of collective liberation isn't just isolated to that 1 week we get off a year to go to Big Bear or whatever it might be, Yeah, thanks, Susan.
Thank you. And I do meditate every morning as well, but that sometimes it's not, it's a great practice. So thank you.
Thank you. I see something. Can you please repeat what would go on each side of the 2 columns you mentioned? Yes, thank you. So it could be just like, well, first of all, I'm kind of forgetting, but we'll see if I catch it. Yeah, maybe just like, what are the initial responses when you hear, what are you devoted to? Like, what are some of the responses that come up? And then to put that on one side of the column. And then you might, without getting too obsessive over it, making too much of a project of it, on the other column, just you might list like, what are you actually spending your time doing? Where are you actually placing your attention? How are you treating people even? Those questions in particular, I'm recalling them from Jack Kornfield's book, A Path with Heart. And there's a part of the book where he talks about accompanying others in their dying process. And he said, in that process, people wouldn't ask how much money is in my bank, how many books did I write, but often, how did I spend my time? How did I treat others? Did I love well? And so I think instead of waiting for us to be on our deathbed, can we bring that question in now, sooner than later, basically? I'm seeing that question in the chat reminded me I saw one earlier, so I must have zoned out. Could you please demonstrate the way one would use the Buddho during meditation? Yeah, so I think I only said it during the meditation. And so it's okay if you zoned out, which is also normal. But basically, when you breathe in, you would recite Bud, so the first half of that mantra. When you breathe out, Do. And it's very simple. It's this 2-syllable word. One full breath, the inhale and exhale, can actually be quite long. And so sometimes it could be almost destabilizing. It's like, that's not enough. And so actually, in between them, the encouragement is just to listen. What is arising? And we're not looking for anything in particular. There could be resistance, like the body and mind don't want to work with this mantra. Maybe it just wants to keep fantasizing. Maybe there is a settling. Maybe there's new emotions that are present, etc. So you just tune in, listen to what else is here, basically. Bree, please, if you'd like to unmute, thanks.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm suffering from a cold right now, so I'm gonna leave myself off screen. But I was gonna put it in the chat when you said to bring voices in. When you were speaking, I thought about Malidoma Somé, the late Malidoma Somé, and several of his readings around ritual. And so this one quote from his book, The Healing Wisdom of Africa, Finding Life Purpose Through Nature, Ritual, and Community. He says, ritual, community, and healing. These 3 are so intertwined in the indigenous world that to speak of one of them is to speak of them all. Ritual, communally designed, helps the individual remember his or her purpose, and such remembering brings healing both to the individual and the community. The community exists in part to safeguard the purpose of each person within it and to awaken the memory of that purpose by recognizing the unique gifts each individual brings to this world. Healing comes when the individual remembers his or her identity, the purpose chosen in the world of ancestral wisdom, and connects and reconnects with that world of spirit. Human beings long for connection, and our sense of usefulness derives from the feeling of connectedness. When we are connected to our own purpose, to the community around us, and to our spiritual wisdom, we are able to live and act with authentic effectiveness.
Wow, that was beautiful. Thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome.
I'm not sure if you have that digitally, but if you could put that in the chat. If
Oh,
not,
yes.
maybe just the name of the author, name of the book, whatever.
Yes, I can
But
do
that was
that.
beautiful. Thank
Okay.
you.
You're welcome.
Mm. So we just have a few more moments left, maybe one more share, maybe not. And so Ashley, A Path with Heart by Jack Cornfield.
Dawn, if we don't have any more shares right now, I might just jump in. Um, so, as most of you know, the teachings that we offer each week are freely offered, and your support for the teachers really matters. And so, if you have benefited from this experience, we invite you to donate to the teachers' Venmo or PayPal, which is the practice of giving Donna. Yeah, the teachers are showing up generously with their time and practice and wisdom. They're not paid to be here. And of course, just your presence and your practice is absolutely a form of generosity, and we very much appreciate it. And if you're able and interested and you would like to offer generosity through financial support, I put in the chat the links to Dawn's website. So you are able to participate there if you're interested. Also wanted to let you know that next week we have a wonderful teacher named Eve Decker will be here next Wednesday at noon. So we invite you back for that as well. And yeah, we really appreciate you being here. And Dawn, thank you so much. It was such a treat to be with you. Really
It
can't wait
was,
to be with
it
you
was,
again, and hopefully in
yeah.
person too.
Me too. I hope to be in person. I don't know if folks realize, but I'm on the East Coast. And so, like, during our call already, it was getting so dark here. And so, yeah. And I just have the fondest memories of being at the retreat center. And so, I definitely would love to return.
Yeah, you're always welcome, as are all of our yogis here, our community, our Big Bear community. So
Mhm.
thank you all so much. You're welcome to come off silent and say goodbye to the community if you're interested. It's so wonderful to see you all. Maybe hear your voices saying goodbye. You're
Thank you so
welcome to.
much.
Thank you, Erin.
Thank you,
Thank
everyone.
you. Thank you, Don. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you,
Thank
Jeff.
you so much, Don.
Thank you all. Have a peaceful day today.
Thank you. Thank you for hosting, Madeline.
Not our pleasure.
Yeah.
All right, we'll see you all next time.
Bye.
Bye bye.